Really, what drives these professional athletes, it's this fundamental thing, isn't it? Finding that right place, the right opportunity.
Absolutely. Where your skills actually get used, where you fit.
And that gets dialed up to 11 when you're facing change, like getting released by your team. That's a huge
It
moment.
really is. It's that intersection of the personal journey and the cold, hard business of the league.
Yeah, the player needs a spot to contribute, to feel valued, maybe get back on track.
While the team's juggling roster spots, salary cap, evaluating talent constantly, it's a puzzle.
Exactly. And that whole complex dynamic, that's what we're diving into today. We've got a bunch of source material articles, insider reports, focusing on NFL wide receiver Gabe Davis.
Right. His search for a new team this 2025 offseason, specifically after leaving Jacksonville.
So our mission here is to unpack all this stuff, pull out the key details, and really try to understand his journey right now.
We're looking at, why did the Jags let him go? What does this team he's visiting now actually need?
How does a guy like Davis potentially fit into their plans?
And the money side, the financial factors here are pretty unique in his case, which makes it interesting.
Because this isn't just like player X visits team Y. It's a real window into the NFL machine.
Mm-hmm. How teams weigh talent versus need, how contracts drive decisions.
And how fast a player's market value can just change. So the main guy is Gabe Davis, and the immediate focus from the sources, like Ian Rappaport, is his current visit.
To the New Orleans Saints, down to the NFC South.
Yeah, this one visit, it really tells a bigger story about the offseason shuffle.
Following a player like Davis through this process, it gives you a concrete example of what's happening across, all 32 teams right now. The constant movement, the evaluations.
Okay, so let's start right there. Where is Gabe Davis in this whole process, this off-season tour the reports mention?
Well, it's definitely underway for him. The
Yeah.
key thing setting this off was his release, right?
From Jacksonville. About a month ago, the reports say.
Yeah, relative to now, early June 2025. That decision by the Jags put him back out there looking for work.
And he's been active, not just sitting by the phone. This tour involves visiting teams.
Which is crucial, right, for both sides. The
Yeah.
player gets a feel for the place, the team gets to, kick the tires, see him in person.
The reports actually list who he met with before heading to New Orleans.
Yeah, saw that. The 49ers were on the list.
Perennial contenders, always interesting.
Then the Giants working through their own stuff.
And the Steelers, too.
Right. So you see a mix there. Different conferences, different team situations.
That does suggest pretty broad interest, doesn't it? Across the league, teams see something in him, despite the Jacksonville situation.
Definitely indicates they see traits worth exploring further. He's clearly on the radar for multiple potential landing spots.
It shows teams are doing their homework, seeing if he might fit their specific needs.
And now, that tour, according to the latest reports, has brought him down south.
To New Orleans. That's the main focus now. Ian Rappaport from NFL Network confirmed it.
He confirmed Davis was visiting the Saints facility.
But Rappaport added something important, didn't he? A little observation.
He did. He framed why this visit makes sense. He said the Saints are a team that could certainly use a receiver of his makeup.
Could certainly use a receiver of his makeup. That's not just filler. That points directly at a need on the Saints roster.
It suggests they see specific qualities in Davis that align with what they're missing. So this isn't just a casual chat.
Right. There's a potential functional fit being hinted at, which leads us perfectly into why Davis is even available. We need to look back at that Jacksonville chapter.
Yeah, to get the full picture of his current situation and why New Orleans might be interested,
Yeah.
you got to understand the recent past. Before the Jags, remember, he was in Buffalo.
4 years there, as a WR2, the reports say.
And during that time in Buffalo, the sources describe him making impressive contributions.
Impressive contributions. That signals he was a key part of a pretty potent offense up there, right? He showed ability.
Definitely. He established value, showed he could produce in the league. That's what led to the free agency interest.
And ultimately the move to Jacksonville.
Exactly. Those contributions in Buffalo, they basically earned him that next contract. The reports say he was rewarded.
With a big deal from the Jaguars. 3 years, $39 million.
Yep. $39 million over 3 years. That's a significant investment.
It shows the Jaguars really thought he could be a major piece for them. Replicate that Buffalo success, maybe even more. High hopes.
Huge expectations tied to that contract.
Yeah.
But the reports are pretty clear. Things didn't go according to plan in Jacksonville, particularly in the 2024 season, his first year there.
Yeah, this is where things took a sharp turn. The numbers tell a story. Through the first 10 games of 2024.
He was averaging a career-low 23.9 yards per game.
Ouch! That's not what you expect from a guy on that contract.
No. And his knack for finding the end zone, which was a thing in Buffalo.
Come on.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
The report said he was on track for the lowest touchdown total of his career through those 10 games.
So let's just frame that. Comes in off impressive contributions, gets $39 million, and then 10 games later, he's posting career lows in yards per game and on pace for his worst TD season ever.
Yeah, based just on those numbers from the sources, the drop-off from his Buffalo performance is stark. A real struggle to make the impact they paid for.
It just shows how things can change so fast in this league, doesn't it? New team, new system. Maybe it just didn't click.
It happens. And then on top of the performance issues, his situation got worse.
The injury.
Yep. The reporting explains his struggle deepened when a meniscus tear required him to undergo season-ending surgery.
Happened after those 10 games, right? So season over.
Season over. A major physical setback layered onto the on-field struggles.
So you've got underperformance relative to the contract, followed by a significant injury ending his year. That's a tough combination.
It certainly is. And that combination, according to the reports, led directly to the Jaguars' decision about his future with the team.
Which was?
They decided to cut bait 2 years early.
Cut bait. Yeah, that's pretty direct language in football. They moved on. Ended that 3-year deal way ahead of schedule.
With 2 full years left on it. And this is a crucial part.
The money.
The money. The reports emphasize they did this despite the massive dead money doing so stuck them with.
Massive dead money. Okay, let's unpack that based on how this usually works. When you cut a guy with guaranteed money left,
that money doesn't just vanish. It hits the team's salary cap. It counts against their spending limit, even though the player isn't there anymore.
Right. So massive implies the financial hit for the Jaguars was substantial. A big chunk of their cap space eaten up by a player no longer on the roster.
Exactly. And that's a really significant point. For a team to willingly take on massive dead money,
it tells you how much they wanted to move on.
It suggests that in their evaluation, the combination of his struggles and the injury was so concerning that absorbing that big financial penalty was somehow the better option than keeping him on the roster as contract number.
Wow. They essentially decided the cost of keeping him, given everything, was higher than the very real cost of cutting him.
It really underscores how far things fell short of expectations in Jacksonville from the team's viewpoint. That $39 million deal followed by this release with a major dead cap hit. It's a stark example.
High hopes meet harsh reality and injury.
Precisely. And that difficult chapter, the performance issues, the injury, the release, that's what brings Gabe Davis to this point.
Back on the market, looking for that next opportunity, which, as we know, has led him to New Orleans.
Right. So now we need to shift focus to the Saints. Why are they interested? What's their situation?
This takes us into Section 3. Digging into the Saints' offense and why they might see Davis as a potential solution.
And the reporting gives us a pretty blunt starting point for their passing game last year.
Which was?
They fielded a bottom 10 pass offense in the NFL last season.
Bottom 10. Okay, that's not good. In today's NFL, you need to throw the ball effectively.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It immediately flags a major area needing improvement. It's the core reason they'd be scouting receivers like Davis. They need help there. Documented need.
And compounding that issue is the QB situation.
Big time. The reports note Derek Carr retired.
Their starter from last season, gone. That's a massive hole to fill.
Creates immediate uncertainty, forces a change under center, and looking ahead to 2025.
The reports say New Orleans has 3 young, inexperienced quarterbacks battling it out for the right to lead the offense.
3 young guys, likely without much starting experience between them, competing for the job. That's a tough spot.
Yeah, no established veteran leader there. They're rolling with youth and hoping one steps up.
Which logically connects right back to the receivers. The reporting makes this point directly.
What's the connection?
It states that having an experienced receiving corps could be extremely beneficial for the winning quarterback's chances for success.
That makes perfect sense, doesn't it? Put yourself in the shoes of a young QB. The game's fast, defenses are tricky.
Pressure's high.
Having guys who know where to be, who run crisp routes, who can win contested balls, it's like a safety net.
It absolutely is. Reliable targets build confidence, help create rhythm. They give the young QB somewhere to go when things break down. It's a support system.
Experienced receivers can definitely ease that transition for a young quarterback.
Provide stability, help smooth out the inevitable bumps. Now, to really hammer home why the Saints need help, the reporting breaks down their actual receiving production from 2024. who was catching the passes.
This part is fascinating. It really shows how skewed their production was, who led the team in receiving yards.
Their leader was tight end Juwan Johnson.
A tight end. Okay, not unheard of, but often a sign that the wideouts aren't dominating.
And it gets more unusual. The report says Johnson was followed closely by running back Alvin Kamara.
A running back.
And then tight end Foster Moreau.
Wait, so the top 3 guys in receiving yards were a tight end, a running back, and another tight end.
That's what the source material indicates. You don't get to a wide receiver until the 4th spot on the list.
Wow, that is highly unusual. It screams that the production wasn't coming from the traditional WR position.
It paints a very clear picture. The main yardage in their passing game came from other positions. Supports the whole bottom 10 pass offense thing.
So who are the leading wide receivers listed after those guys?
The next 3 names mentioned are Chris Olave, Marquez Valdez-Scantling, and Rashid Shaheed.
Okay, recognizable names. Olave's talented, MVS has deep speed, Shaheed has shown flashes.
Yes, but here's the crucial context the reporting adds about those 3.
What's that?
It notes that none of the 3 played more than half the season.
Ah, there it is. So their top actual wide receivers were barely available, missing more than half the season.
Seems that way,
Yeah.
based on the report. Likely injuries, other issues. But the result is their key guys at the position weren't consistently on the field.
Well, that would absolutely cripping a passing attack and contribute to being bottom 10. You need your playmakers out there. Highlights a huge reliability problem.
Exactly. You can't build consistency when your main wideouts are missing that much time. It all leads back to the conclusion drawn explicitly in the reporting.
Which is?
This underlines the team's need for a reliable receiver.
It makes total sense. Struggling offense, production coming from unexpected places, key wideouts unavailable. Reliability becomes paramount.
It's presented not just as a want, but a critical need based on everything that happened last year.
So that sets the stage perfectly for why the Saints are kicking the tires on guys like Gabe Davis. Now, what does their current WR room look like heading into 2025, according to the sources?
Okay, looking ahead, the reporting names the presumed top 3. Olave, Shaheed, and Brandon Cooks.
Olave, assuming he's healthy, is their likely number 1. Shaheed brings that speed element, and Cooks is back a proven veteran.
Right, some known quantities at the top, but then you look at the depth behind them, and, well, it reinforces the need.
How so? How's the depth described?
It's broken into 2 groups. First, a mix of receivers who have shown inconsistent hints of talent in the past.
Inconsistent hints. That sounds like guys who flash sometimes but aren't dependable week to week.
Exactly. The names mentioned are Cedric Wilson, Donovan Peoples-Jones, and Dante Pettis. Guys who've had moments, but consistency has been the issue.
Okay, so that's one group of depth players. What's the other?
The second group is described as players with relatively little experience.
Rookies, young guys, undrafted players maybe?
Seems like it. The names listed are Bub Means, Kevin Austin, Mason Tipton, Chris Tyree, and Moochie Dixon. Largely unproven at the NFL level.
So behind the top 3, you've got veterans who haven't been consistent, and then a bunch of guys with very little track record.
Precisely. And if the stated need is reliability.
That depth chart doesn't exactly scream reliability, does it?
Not really. It highlights a lack of proven, dependable options beyond maybe Cooks. This is where the opportunity potentially exists for someone like Davis.
There's a clear opening for a player with more NFL experience, someone who has produced consistently at points in his career to come in and compete for snaps, or at least provide better depth.
That's the connection. The Saints' documented struggles, the QB youth, the production issues, the injuries, and this specific depth chart structure. It all points to needing receiver help. Which brings us to Section 4.
Right. How does Gabe Davis potentially fit into this specific picture? And what about the money?
So projecting his fit, based only on what the sources say, they offer a comparison.
Who do they compare him to?
Suggests adding Davis gives them another receiver in the frame of Wilson or Peoples-Jones. So initially placing him in that tier of guys with inconsistent track records.
Okay, but they distinguish him too, right?
Yes, immediately. They highlight attributes that set him apart from that group. Says Davis has more deep ball ability and more consistent results.
More deep ball ability. That feels relevant, doesn't it, for a potentially struggling offense and young QBs?
Absolutely. A guy who can stretch the field vertically, take the top off the defense, that can open things up underneath for everyone else. It adds an explosive element.
Gives those young QBs a downfield option, someone who can track the ball.
Could be valuable. And then the other part, more consistent results. Where does that come from? given the Jacksonville year.
Has to be referencing Buffalo, right? The impressive contributions phase.
Exactly. Based purely on the reporting, that's the only justification. The implication is his overall career, despite Jacksonville, shows more pass consistency than guys like Wilson or DPJ.
So the hope would be he recaptures some of that Buffalo form, providing the reliability they need.
That seems to be the gamble or the potential upside they're evaluating. Can he be that guy again?
Okay, so potential fit, deep threat, history of past consistency, addressing that reliability need. Now the finances, this part is really interesting.
It really is, because his old Jacksonville contract looms large here. The reports remind us about that $11.5 mission still due to Davis from Jacksonville.
And just to be crystal clear, that's money he gets no matter what, even if he doesn't sign anywhere.
Correct. It's guaranteed money from the Jags contract. He's getting paid that $11.5 million.
Which has to change the whole dynamic for his next deal.
Absolutely. Because he has that financial safety net, the prediction from the sources is that Davis, who's only 26, will likely command only a one-year deal from whoever signs him.
A one-year prove-it type deal. That's a massive shift from the 3-year, $39 million deal he just had.
Why does the Jacksonville money lead to a likely one-year deal? What's the thinking there?
Well, from the team side, it's way lower risk, right? Given the recent struggles, the injury, they get a one-year look, see if he bounces back, fits the system, no long-term commitment needed up front.
Makes sense for the team. What about for Davis? Why would he accept just 1 year?
Because that $11.5 million guarantee means he doesn't have to chase the absolute biggest paycheck right now. He can afford to prioritize the situation.
Find the right fit. The place where he can actually play well, show he's healthy.
Exactly. Show his value again. Then, potentially hit the market next year, 2026, looking for a bigger multi-year deal based on strong performance. He can take less now for a better shot later.
That guaranteed money gives him strategic flexibility. And the reporting gets even more specific on the potential salary, right? Citing Nick Underhill.
Yeah, Underhill, who covers the Saints closely, apparently goes a step further in saying that Davis will almost certainly get the league minimum.
Wow. Almost certainly the league minimum, after being on a $13 million a year average deal.
It's a stark illustration of how quickly market value can plummet in the NFL. Based on the injury, the recent tape, and that Jacksonville offset money. The prediction is his price tag hits the absolute floor for a player with his service time.
It suggests there isn't likely to be a bidding war driving the price up. Teams know he's getting paid by the Jags.
Seems to be the read on the market, yeah. The combination of factors really suppresses his earning potential on this next contract.
So if the money is likely to be the league minimum wherever he goes, and he can't really force a bidding war,
then the decision comes down to other factors. The reporting suggests it will likely come down to team fit.
which means the non-financial stuff becomes huge.
Absolutely critical. If the Saints want him, they need to sell him on the opportunity, on the vision. The reports say they need to demonstrate how he fits in the offense and the locker room.
So it's about the role. Is he going to be a starter, rotational guy? What routes will he run? How do the coaches see him contributing?
And the culture fit, too. Does he mesh with the coaches, the other players, especially those young QBs? Does it feel like a place he can succeed personally and professionally?
That personal visit becomes absolutely crucial then. It's where both sides feel each other out on those non-contractual points.
It's the primary stage for that evaluation. Team sees his health, interviews him. He gets a vibe for the place, the people, the plan.
It's a two-way street. He's interviewing them as much as they're interviewing him, trying to find that best situation to rebuild his value.
Precisely. So the outcome of this visit to New Orleans is really significant for his immediate future.
As the reporting concludes, depending on how it goes.
Davis could end up one step closer to his next NFL home.
So the potential league minimum deal might set the financial baseline, but this visit, this assessment of fit, could be the real decider.
Yeah, it's where the narrative of his recent struggles meets the Saints' clear need, potentially finding that mutual solution.
Okay, so we've really covered a lot of ground here, digging into these sources on Gabe Davis. We traced it from the release by Jacksonville, tough season, the injury, that big contract ending early.
Right, the whole context of why he's available.
Then we shifted to the Saints, their clear, documented need for receiver help, bottom 10 pass offense, weird production distribution last year, injuries to key guys.
And that current depth chart behind Olave, Shaheed, and Cooks looking pretty thin on proven reliability.
We talked about how Davis might fit the deep ball ability, that pass consistency they hope he recaptures, potentially filling that reliability void.
And then the really unique financial angle. that $11.5 million from Jacksonville changing everything.
Leading to the expectation of a one-year, possibly league minimum deal, making team fit the paramount factor in his decision.
It's a classic NFL offseason story in many ways, isn't it?
Yeah.
Player movement, team needs, contract realities colliding.
It really is. And you see through this one example just how much goes into these decisions, how teams evaluate risk, how quickly fortunes change.
And how crucial finding that right situation, that right fit, is for a player trying to navigate this league, especially coming off a down year and an injury.
It shows you that getting the big contract doesn't mean the journey's over. Proving value is constant.
Yeah, the evaluation never really stops in the NFL.
Which really leaves you with this final thought, looking at the whole arc described in the sources. Gabe Davis goes from a $39 million contract, seen as a key free agent signing, to struggling, getting injured, released with massive dead money attached, and now, just over a year later, he's potentially signing for the league minimum on a one-year deal. What does that rapid swing tell you about the risks teams take in free agency, how volatile player value can be?
And flipping it around, for a player like Davis who has that financial cushion from the old deal, how do you make that choice? Do you prioritize the best possible situation to perform and earn a bigger deal later, even if it means taking the minimum now? Or do you try and maximize the current salary, maybe at a less ideal spot?
It's that fascinating tension between immediate security, long-term earning potential, and finding the place you can actually succeed on the field. A tough calculation players and teams are constantly making in this league, something to chew on as we see where Gabe Davis ultimately lands.